now that we've talked about how to interview for the writer's room, what the expectations are for you when you enter the writer's room, let's talk about how the writer's room really works. And I'll go through week by week. When the first week of the writer's room, sometimes the first 2 weeks, if there's a lot of time, which I think is almost a thing of the past, every writer's room that I've been in has like had less and less time. So the first week is usually just introductions. It's really about just getting to know everybody, getting familiar. Well, I'll say the first day. The first day or two is really about introductions, getting to know everybody. You might not do much on the first day. If you do, it might just be reading the pilot all together as a group. And let's say the first day is really about getting to know each other. So maybe there's introductions in the writer's room. Maybe you're telling people about where you're from and what other rooms you've worked in, whatever. Usually it's really not about your other jobs. It's about who you are as a person and just getting to know everybody. And then usually on the first day also we'll read the script. Everybody will read the script individually. Maybe they'll go to their office for a bit, find a place to read, and then come back at the end of the day with notes on the pilot script, with, ideas about the pilot script, and so on and so forth. That's usually what we're doing in the first day or two of the writer's room, because for the most part, if it's a new room, if it's the beginning of a show, that means the pilot has been sold. Potentially the pilot has been filmed, but there's always reshoots. There's always rewrites of the pilot once the writer's room starts. So the first day is usually about looking at the pilot, rereading it as a group, coming back and everybody giving their opinion about what could potentially be changed, what could be improved, any punch-ups that we can make, and any if there are any reshoots, what we're going to be doing and adding to the reshoots. So that's usually the first day. I would say that the next day or the next days in that first week is called blue sky. It's really the blue sky process, where as a group, we now start to brainstorm the entire season. We start to think about character arcs, story arcs, and we're really just pitching all day. And usually the night before, your showrunner will have given you things to think about for the next day, maybe prompts for pitches. Maybe they want pitches on certain characters, and maybe they want pitches on certain storylines. You'll get that assignment the night before, come in ready the next day, ready to pitch your heart out. You're going to be pitching a lot. So it's actually a really good exercise to get used to pitching, get used to talking, get used to getting your ideas out there. And pitching in itself is an art. So giving yourself patience, being patient with yourself as you get better at pitching. You're going to start to learn that the way that you pitch something actually sometimes gets it in the script, when otherwise, if you're a more inexperienced pitcher, your pitch could be good, but because of the way you said it, the way that it came across, the joke didn't really land, it doesn't really get in there. But no worries. It's a learning experience. It's about growing. It's about coming back the next day better, putting yourself out there, being open to being rejected, being open to your pitch being rejected and not being good, so that you can allow yourself to get comfortable just speaking up and just talking. So those are the first two things, intros and blue sky. We're thinking broadly about the show. We're doing a bunch of pitching. And then the third or fourth day, there might be rewrites to the pilot, because now we have an idea of what the season arc might be, what the character arcs might be, what the story arcs might be. So we might be planting seeds in the pilot. So we might be doing some rewrites of the pilot, because now we have new scene ideas for the pilot. We have new points of view, new information that needs to be added to the pilot. So there's going to be a pilot rewrite potentially in that first week. So you can see how we're really just getting right into it. We're getting right into getting the pilot ready to either be reshot or just to more or to fit better into the stories that we want to tell for the season. And And that's what we're going to be. So that's where we are. So after we write the pilot, so after there's a pilot rewrite, if that is what's happening in the room, then you're going to start jumping into breaking story for episode 2. And this makes me feel like, now that I'm talking about it, that I might need to do an episode on breaking story, because breaking story, I think, is one of the most, if not the most important skill that you need in the writer's room. And it was one that I personally felt that it was hard to come by because I hadn't written that many scripts before I got into the writer's room. So it really took a long time for me to learn how to break story. So I might do an episode on that. If you want that, put that in the chat. Let me know. So after we do a pilot rewrite, then we're jumping into writing episode 2. We're jumping into breaking story for episode 2. And we usually do this as a full group. And I say that because a lot of times in the writer's room, because after week 1 starts, things really start moving quite quickly. We start breaking story for episode 2. We potentially start also doing reshoots for the pilot. After you break story and you have a breaking story means, and for my super new people, breaking story means deciding the beats of the story, literally deciding what happens in the story. And after your breaking story for episode 2, after you have a solid idea or a general idea of what episode 2 is going to be, what the A story, the B story, the C story is going to be, we usually send a synopsis of that. It's usually called a 1-pager or maybe a 2-pager, where you just write briefly in 1 to 2 pages what happens in the A, B, and C story for episode 2. That goes off usually to producers, to executives. Like, let's say it's a TBS show. And let's say, I remember when I was working on The Last OG, and Monkey Paw was the production company. So you'd send that 2-pager to both TBS and you'd send it to Monkey Paw, because these are the executives and the producers that are in charge of this show. So they need to be kept up and know what's going on in the episodes in the show. So you send that off to them, usually while you're waiting to get a response from the 2-pager, because it needs to have there's always like levels of approval. So we're basically just waiting for everyone to agree that this is a good enough story to continue to work on. We're usually working on the pilot still. And this goes on for the rest of the writer's room. We're usually working on 2 episodes at a time. You're either working on breaking story for one, shooting one, editing one, while you are going out to outline with one, and then you're doing a table read for one, and then someone's off to write the script for another one. Sometimes even 3 episodes are being worked on at the same time. You're doing final touches on the pilot while you send somebody off to write the script for episode 2. And then this is usually when the writer's room kind of breaks up. If it's a group of 8 in the writer's room, they'll usually split the room up into 4s, sometimes even smaller groups if they're more experienced writers, into even smaller groups, so that someone is in charge and moving each episode forward. So we go from breaking story to writing a 1 to 2-pager that goes out to executives, production team. And then after the 2-pager is approved, we're writing an outline. We're usually writing that outline as a team, just like we broke story as a team, as a group. After the outline is written, that again goes out for approval. Sometimes there's changes that are made to that outline. And then once everybody agrees, meaning the production team, the executives, the actual showrunners, then that outline is handed to one writer. And that one writer, who is usually the writer who gets the credit for the episode, that writer goes off and writes a draft of that script by themselves. I think a lot of times they'll give you a week to yourself. You can do that from home a lot of times, to write your script. While that writer is out writing that script, there's probably the rest of the writers are probably working on 2 other episodes at that time, whether they are breaking the story for the episode 3, or they're on the outline for episode 4 or whatever. Basically, it just works like a fast moving train is how I like to describe it, because that's how it feels. So when the writer comes back with their draft, the whole team reads that draft, and everybody goes to their separate offices or chills somewhere in the writer's room as they read that draft and put their notes in. And then we all gather back together and we all give notes and cuts and just ideas and punch ups and all kinds of things. It's usually just a broad overview of what our notes are for the script. And then after we give our notes for the script, there is a group rewrite of that script usually. And after the group rewrite of that script is sent off once again to executives in production. And then after that script is approved, then we do a punch-up pass usually in preparation for the table read. So by the time you get to a table read, the executives who are reading this script have seen it. They've seen the outline. There's no surprises. The table read is really just trying to get a sense of, is this funny? Because especially in comedy rooms, if people don't laugh, it's not going to get across on screen. If it gets across, if it's funny in the table read, it's usually funny on screen. It's why stand-up and sketch and these kinds of things are such great training for comedy writers' rooms, because that's basically what you're doing in the writer's room, is you have a good sense of what would make people laugh in a live audience. Then you definitely have a good sense of what would make people laugh in a script. So after the table read, we all take notes as writers about what worked in the table read, what didn't work. And once again, we gather again to give our opinion about what worked and what didn't work about the table read, and we do another rewrite. After that rewrite, then that script is ready to be shot. So, like I said, multiple things can be going on at once, but that's generally the life cycle of a script. It goes from breaking story all the way to the preparing it to be shot. And even then, the person who's in charge of that episode, the writer of that episode, will usually, if it's a particularly good writer's room and they want writers to get trained on every step of the process, then you can give some notes on the edit. You'll be able to be one of the first ones to see the edit and give your opinion on that. And then we start the whole process all over again for episode 3, which a lot of times has already been being worked on by another group. And now everybody is coming in to give notes on the outline, give notes on the draft, give notes on the table read script, and so on and so forth. As you can see, there's not a lot of room for your ego really as a writer in the writer's room process, because it's so fast moving. It needs so many ideas. By the time you get to the end of a season in a writer's room, thousands of ideas have been pitched. You should have pitched hundreds of those ideas yourself and used. The vast majority of those ideas are what led us to the product that we have at the very end. And your job, like I said, is really just to contribute as much of those ideas as possible, because that is your job. And that's what's going to make you a good contributor to the writer's room, is actually contributing.